One last time. Earth 67.
Whoa.
What the?
I'm the Divine Crusader.
I need you to come with me.
Who the heck are you?
I just told you that. Listen. I'm from the future.
How dare you point at me?
You were pointing first.
Rude to point.
You're being very rude. You're not even believing what I'm saying.
Which one pointed first?
The Divine Crusader.
Obviously.
You're pointing at me right now
I'm
as you
pointing,
say that.
you're
Look
pointing.
at you.
I'm
Look
just
at your
pointing
finger.
at your pointing.
Look at your
which
finger
is
right
different
now.
than...
We're back with the Elder Scrolls Versus series and looking at the two people to take on the mantle of the Divine Crusader and Champion of the Divines of varying number, Pelinal Whitestrake, and his successor, the Hero of Kvatch. For the sake of this video, we're going to be looking at the generic John Cyrodiil. Yes, we're going to call him John Cyrodiil a lot. Essentially, this dude with his silly smile, who I'm also considering as the same guy we see in a bunch of official Elder Scrolls artworks, coming straight from Bethesda. Basically, he's an Imperial with dark hair, and has done practically everything you'd expect him to do. Then, with Pelinal, we're going to be looking at his many mythical tales told throughout the Songs of Pelinal and other sources, back in the First Era. We're not looking at his Oblivion ghost form because, well, he doesn't really do anything in that form. Now, I have heard people suggest that these tales are exaggerated and most of what is told is propaganda, but A, with proof that Umaril existed, a figure who is very relevant to this matchup, and B, because of how mental it all is, I'm considering it all real, or at least canon I suppose. So, let's answer the question of who is mightier out of the two Divine Crusaders, Pelinal Whitestrake or the Hero of Kvatch.
Hail, knight! You seek my relics whither they hide.
Before we look into what these guys can do and compare, it's worth noting the two scenarios I have for this fight. One, we'll look at the Hero of Kvatch in the base game and Knights of the Nine, making it a Divine Crusader versus Divine Crusader mirror match. So essentially, the Hero of Kvatch and Pelinal will be wearing the Crusader relics. Scenario 2 is where we look at the new Lord of Madness, when the Hero of Kvatch gets the powers of Sheogorath after getting a new staff, specifically during his fight with Sheogorath. Well, realistically after, because he's not going to fight both at the same time. The reason for this is that the power climb of the Hero of Kvatch isn't linear. It goes up in a great spike here, quite drastically mind you, and while we're talking about John Cyrodiil, we might as well talk about what he can do first. Practically the moment he's freed from his cell, a cell he shouldn't be in, he's already on par with the Blades' bodyguards at the bare minimum with nothing but a rag and his hands. As the story goes on, John Cyrodiil demonstrates how great of a warrior he is, going in and out of Oblivion gates like it's a summer holiday, and conquers the arena and all of its champions, effectively making him one of the best warriors in the country by default. Sure, you can essentially skip the Grey Prince fight by making him depressed about his real identity, but still, John Cyrodiil is number one in Cyrodiil. He beats Manimarco, which is a bit of a weird one, because his appearance in Oblivion isn't really consistent with other appearances. But at the very least, Manimarco's Oblivion appearance makes him one of the most dangerous mages around, having master level spells. His main rival is an Archmage, and that Archmage has to sacrifice himself to give the Hero of Kvatch a fighting chance, so I think it's safe to say that Manimarco is still stronger than practically all mortal mages, or at least on par with the greatest of them, like Neloth for instance. It should be noted that this is just Manimarco's mortal body, and the death of this body doesn't really change anything though. It doesn't affect the Necromancer moon, and Manimarco has died before but has just walked it off, so I'm not going to put John Cyrodiil in god-slaying status just yet, like both Ryan Nerevar and John Skyrim are. He also defeats Mankar Camoran, who is also an immensely powerful mage at that master level. We're talking one of the best around, even before he rewrote his soul to wear the Amulet of Kings, I think. It's a theory, so don't take this one fully seriously, The thing to take seriously though is that when Martin Septim mentions that Cameron bound himself to the Mysterium Xarxes to essentially make his own mini Daedric realm, which technically makes him a minor Daedric prince. A very, very minor one. He's obviously not holding a candle to other Daedric princes like the guy he serves, Maren's Dagon. And on that note, maybe calling him a Daedric Lord is more apt, since they can often govern sub-realms for the other Daedric princes, and perhaps this is what Mankar is doing for Dagon here, since Dagon gave him the Mysterium Xarxes. Either way, he's not really a mortal at this point, and the Hero of Kvatch still beats him in his own realm, effectively making him one of the most powerful mortals, and I mean proper mortals, ever. Then, on top of that, with the Crusader relics, possibly one of the greatest sets of armour in all of the Elder Scrolls, the Hero of Kvatch has the equipment to match the power. We'll go over this more in the Pelinal section, but Pelinal wore the same suit of armour and that armour wasn't pierced until right at the end of his life. You'll understand later why that's so impressive, but with all the buffs the set comes with, it essentially means the fight between the Hero of Kvatch and Pelinal will come down to abilities and their own physical prowess, not equipment. They're wearing the same stuff after all, but let's then move on to Sheogorath, John Cyrodiil. So while he isn't quite fully the Sheogorath we meet in Skyrim yet, John Cyrodiil acquires a new staff of Sheogorath and effectively has the Prince of Madness's powers in their totality. I've done a full Sheogorath video if you want to see more on him specifically, but it is interesting how these powers manifested. Essentially, with the staff in game, you can freeze people. Although you can't hurt them, so yeah, I can't say it will help much in a fight unless Uncle Sheo 2 needs a breather. But more importantly, the Hero of Kvatch enters a completely different realm of power with Sheogorath's buffs. The Hero of Kvatch should go up against pretty much any mortal and some divine pseudo-beings before, like Umaril, Manamako and Mankar Cameron, but he wasn't beating a Daedric prince. It took Martin Septim to become an avatar of Akatosh to see him off, but in the climax of the Shivering Isles, during the Grey March, the Hero of Kvatch with the powers of Sheogorath lays the beatdown on Jiggalag. This beatdown was so bad that Jiggalag accepts defeat, trauma dumps, and then leaves to go, somewhere. Where did he go? Come on, tell me Todd, we still don't have any answers here. Note that Jiggalag was such a threat that all the other Daedric princes banded together to make him into Sheogorath for fear that he would conquer all of Oblivion. Now sure, you could argue that this Jiggalag isn't as powerful, since he literally just came out of the old Sheogorath's body for the Grey March, so maybe he hasn't warmed up yet, but that doesn't matter. The Hero of Kvatch is quite clearly god level at this point, and I don't mean the Tribunal level, the Manamako level, and whatever kind of lower level god. I'm talking about Daedric Prince level, guys who are capable of destroying the world, which Dagon apparently did in a past world during the times of Lig and Molag Bal being in charge. Now that entire affair is a doozy. And there's a continence of Nern video that explains that, but the Hero of Kvatch is truly one of the big boys now. As a Daedric prince, he is going to be a level above even other gods. For some context as to how far above, in ESO, Nocturnal turned up in Sothasil's house, laid him out and turned him into a shadow puppet very quickly. There are levels to godhood. Still, how does this stack up to everyone's favourite elf exterminator? Well, Pelinal does some pretty mad things in his myths, and madness is a key word here.
All that has passed since my death is like mists that my mind cannot take hold of.
Pelinal Whitestrake has one of the highest kill counts of any Elder Scrolls character, and this is a series with some pretty high kill counts. He possibly eliminated millions of Aelid elves and destroyed their sorcerer kings for fun. These Aelid sorcerer kings were no joke, among the greatest spellcasters of their era. He fought battle after battle against whole armies and didn't take a single bit of damage. he wiped 2 whole cities off the face of the earth. And apparently, there was no way for the Aelids to harm Pelinal for the longest time, since they couldn't get past his armour, but his durability wasn't entirely with his armour. Mr. Whitestrake, Sir Whitestrake? Pelinal, has one of the most insane durability showings I've ever seen in the Elder Scrolls. So, long story short, he went a bit insane, which he's prone to do, and mistook the Khajiit for elves, so he decided to exterminate them, as you do. They climbed a mountain to escape him, being good climbers, to which Pelinal wrestled the mountain until he was on top of it. Now this means he either RKO'd a mountain, which, I literally cannot even imagine, or more likely he just climbed the thing really aggressively. But this isn't the jaw-dropping part. No, the bit that I always find hilarious is that Alkosh, essentially Khajiit Akatosh, had to come down to fight Pelinal, else he'd turn the Khajiit into an endangered species. They had a fight, but Alkosh won by shouting Pelinal out of elsewhere. Yes, he literally Fusro-darted him off a mountain and out of a country. But Pelinal wasn't hurt here. He's hurt for the first time even later, meaning he got ejected off a mountain and into a new country without taking any damage, and was basically only hurt enough to realise that he just needed to chill out. While Alkosh is technically different from Akatosh, except not really, Mehrunes Dagon was also bested by Akatosh, and while he got his licks in enough to turn Akatosh's avatar into a statue, this is basically where I think Pelinal sits. In this weird zone just below Daedric Princes, appearing on Nirn anyway, and full on Divine Azra. He's not really got their power level and their destruction level, since he just hacks at people with a sword and a mace, but he does have the endurance and the durability to just keep going over and over again until most of what he wants to kill is dead. Even his own death paints a picture of how absolutely busted he was. The rest of Alessia's army, and this is Alessia, the first Empress of Cyrodiil, which included Thu'um using Norns and an actual demigod, Morahaus the Man-Bull, son of Kain, weren't ready to launch an attack on the White Gold Tower, wary of Umaril and his new army of Aurorans, Daedra Knights from Meridia. Pelinal, with his sanity hanging by a thread, decided to go alone, taking on an entire army of elves, Daedra Knights with weapons enhanced by Valiance, essentially Aetheris magic, that actually let them get through Pelinal's armour, and of course, Umaril himself. Now despite all of this setup, when Umaril, the most powerful of the Aelids and again an actual demigod, finally came down to fight a wounded Pelinal, the Divine Crusader still won that fight, only falling after being brutally wounded in the fight and beset by a bunch of sorcerer kings with those Valiance enhanced weapons, who cut him into pieces. At this point, the war was practically over, with the Aelid and Daedric army devastated by Pelinal and Pelinal alone, leading to Alessia and her soldiers to easily waltz into the White Gold Tower and take it, making her an empress. Pelinal's strength and violence might be extraordinary, but his endurance and durability are truly ridiculous. The man felt true physical pain for the first time, and he simply did not care. But now, with a strong idea of what each of these Divine Crusaders can do, let's look at Scenario 1, Mortal John Cyrodiil vs Pelinal Whitestrake.
Your prayers have woken me from my endless dream. Or perhaps you have entered my dream, and I still sleep.
So, as I said before, equipment-wise, no one is getting an advantage here. You might be tempted to look at both their fights against Umaril, a shared adversary, to figure out how a fight would go. After all, with the blessing of Talos, the Hero of Kvatch was actually able to finally end Umaril, which is something Pelinal could not do, but the context around those fights is different. Obviously, Pelinal existed in a time far before Talos, so there was no way of him destroying Umaril's sort of spirit form. Pelinal also went through a gauntlet of enemies, literally a whole army of elves and Daedra, before fighting Umaril, heavily wounded, and he still won. The Hero of Kvatch was relatively a lot fresher, and it doesn't seem like Umaril had all the time in the world to prep as he did with Pelinal. Plus, he had help from the aided Sorcerer Kings in Pelinal's time, operating out of the White Gold Tower. I would argue that the Hero of Kvatch, based on who he has beaten and who he didn't fight, would not have been able to fight through all the armies that Pelinal did to get to Umaril and then beat Umaril. The Hero of Kvatch needed Archmage Tarvan's sacrifice to take on Mannimarco, and I don't think he could take on foes much stronger than this pseudo-god or demigod power level, but Pelinal fought a full-on Aedric god in Akatosh. Sure, he didn't win, but he got blasted into another country and didn't even feel it. The difference in durability and endurance is the reason why I think the Hero of Kvatch will eventually be overwhelmed. It's not necessarily a case of who can hit harder. I'm actually willing to bet that the Hero of Kvatch's versatility, because he's learned a bit of everything, actually means that he's more destructive, and perhaps he's got enough in him to actually draw some blood from Pelinal, but I don't think Pelinal really gets that badly hurt in this fight. For context, the whole Umaril business was like Superman fighting a bunch of superhumans wielding kryptonite weapons and still winning. He's ridiculous, and while the Hero of Kvatch has shown the ability to take on demigod or divinely enhanced foes, Pelinal does feel like a step above. There are even some rumours that Pelinal is a Shezarene, or even the body of the dead god Shor/Lorcan, who is then enhanced by the 8 divines, effectively making him a god, or I suppose the vessel of a god. He claimed that he was not sure to the many Nords who thought he was, but there is definitely something godly going on with him, and if you want to know more about that in detail, this Pelinal video explains the truly mad world of the first Divine Crusader. The Hero of Kvatch also doesn't have as strong a connection with Meridia specifically if we compare him to, say, the last Dragonborn. And if he had something like Dawnbreaker with all of its valiance, he might have had the kryptonite needed to overcome this power and durability difference. It's essentially a case of the Hero of Kvatch fighting his stronger godly predecessor without the specific weapons needed to beat him to make up the power difference, and thus I declare that in this scenario 1, Pelinal Whitestrake takes the win. It's probably not all that close to be honest, but what about scenario 2? Well, I have a lot of interesting notes about this one.
Wonderful! Time for a celebration! Cheese for everyone! Wait, scratch that! Cheese for no one!
Now, I've already done a bit of a comparison between Pelinal and Mehrunes Dagon, since both fought Akatosh/Alkosh. It's kinda similar. The big difference is that while both lost, Dagon was actually able to hurt Akatosh's avatar, whereas Pelinal didn't really do anything to Alkosh from the documentation we have. Now, Pelinal fought actual Alkosh, apparently, whereas Dagon fought an avatar of Akatosh, but I don't think there's really too much in it. The Hero of Kvatch with the power of Sheogorath defeated a Daedric prince in Jigalag, a being who I think is safe to say is another level from Dagon, given the whole Daedric princes coming together to turn Jigalag into Sheogorath thing. Thus, I also think it's safe to say that the new Sheogorath, bare minimum, is as strong as Dagon, and is more than likely even mightier. I just said before that Pelinal is not as powerful as Dagon from what we know, and I think the thing with the Divine Crusader here is that he lacks the power to really hurt this level of opponents, even if his durability and endurance are more than a match. It's like a honey badger fighting a lion, with Pelinal being the honey badger. Honey badgers don't have the same destructive powers as a lion, obviously, but the guys do punch above their weight because of their endurance and durability. But again, a lion would usually beat a honey badger. They usually just don't bother because it's too much of a hassle. And I think this is actually a good comparison for this fight. This is not a question of who would win, because it's Sheogorath, or Sheogorath John Cyrodiil. It's more of a question of how the new Lord of Madness would win. Of course, there is the option of just having an absolute slugfest, where the pair just batter each other, and Sheogorath's greater power eventually overwhelms Pelinal, the same way that it overwhelmed Jiggalag, but this isn't Sheogorath's typical style. Sure, this is what happened with Jiggalag, but this is a special case, and Jiggalag does say that the new Sheogorath will have to grow into his station as the new Lord of Madness. The thing is, Sheogorath isn't the only person who's mad here. Pelinal Whitestrake is famous for having bouts of madness. He is sometimes described as having the rage of a mindless dragon, and his madness could only be calmed by Alessia, although not stopped because he killed a lot of people. But Sheogorath is the Lord of Madness, and that brings up the question of whether the Cheese Prince has some level of dominion over him. Pelinal was cleared of this madness in death, so it's not like he ended up in the Shivering Isles or anything, like Pelagius the Mad for instance, but is this something Sheogorath could work with? This is something I doubt, but I can't quite rule out, since the insanity seems to be somehow linked to Akatosh specifically. We have the whole mindless dragon quote, and he seems to talk to a being called Akka in his bouts of madness, Akka assumably being an older form of Akatosh. But because he isn't exactly mentally stable, there is also the case in which Sheogorath could potentially use this madness against Pelinal as a sort of trick, a way to play him like a puppet master. Sheogorath did this with the 16 other Daedric princes, according to these books, the 16 Accords of Madness. Well, we only have 3 of these books, but because it's called 16 Accords, he more than likely bested the other 13 too. So it's not like he couldn't play some sort of elaborate trick on Pelinal to put him right where he wants, especially given how unstable he was. Pelinal mistook Khajiit for elves and ended up getting into a fight with Alkosh over it. He was also known to do a bit of friendly fire in his madness, so it does really feel like this is something that Sheogorath could manipulate. Now technically Khajiit might have actually descended from elves, so maybe he did have a point there, but that's besides my point. Sheogorath is all about trickery, and could reasonably easily point Pelinal to try and exterminate elves that end up getting him into a situation he can't come back from. Perhaps the Sheogorath of Kvatch calls upon the tales of the Nerevarin, a reincarnation of a Daedric champion and a Dunmer, to which Pelinal ends up in Akavir in hot pursuit, probably swimming the entire way there. Now this might not be the best idea, but I'm not mad or some sort of mad genius. Sheogorath is, and the entire point of him is that he cannot be predicted, and it typically isn't his style just to smash his opponent into the dirt. Yes, we have the Jiggalag situation, but that was a battle for the Shivering Isles, and after acclimatizing for a little bit, perhaps when the madness sets in, so do the mad plans. Also, as a true Daedric prince, the Cheese Prince of Kvatch cannot actually be defeated anyway. Even if Pelinal had enough juice to beat him on Nirn, which I doubt, he'd just respawn in the Shivering Isles, and if they met in the Shivering Isles, well, there's no beating a Daedric prince in their own Oblivion realm, unless you are a truly ridiculous level of power. Realistically, there is no winning for Pelinal here, even if he is the corpse of Lorcan like some believe. Even if the power difference could be overcome, we have a mentally unstable death machine against the guy who collects mentally unstable death machines in his realm. Well, someone who just started to, but you get the idea. Forget it being the Hero of Kvatch. It's a Daedric prince, or a dude who has yet to fully embrace the title but has the full powers of a Daedric prince, against a pseudo-god who isn't quite in control of all of his faculties. A very powerful true god against a kinda god who is absolutely mental in a way that is detrimental, not in a way that is beneficial like with Sheogorath. It was never going to be a fair fight, and thus I declare that the new Sheogorath, the Hero of Kvatch transformed, would defeat Pelinal Whitestrake. And I guess this technically ends 1-1, with a stomp on either scenario. I guess that does make this close overall. Does that make my title clickbait? No, surely not.
Yep, guess I'm ugly goo.
Thanks for watching this versus video, and I hope you're enjoying the series thus far. Also, it's a series, so if you like this one, maybe check out the rest. We're back at them, and I have heard people wanting more non-Skyrim matchups, so here we are, a taste of Oblivion. I'll probably do something Morrowind related next, depending on how this goes, and do remember that I'm looking at the lore version of these characters. I mean, there is only a lore version of Pelinal Whitestrake, so I guess it's easier to understand. Also, Pelinal might be a time-travelling cyborg. It's not really that relevant to this matchup, but have that little fact, I guess. He also bites people. Again, not the most relevant, but if he's biting you, you pretty much are dead at that point anyway. In general, when we look at a lot of player characters, things do tend to get pretty dubious pretty quickly, because everyone has their own idea of what the character is like and what they can do. The nice thing about the Hero of Kvatch is that I can just say, he's wearing Pelinal stuff, or I can just say, he's the new Sheogorath. It is quite neat, but what I do also want to say is that before becoming the next Sheogorath, the Hero of Kvatch isn't quite up there with the level of the last Dragonborn and the Nerevarine. Those guys are Godslayers, and I think that's potentially the level that's closer to Pelinal, but as Sheogorath, it's another level above them. Still, tell me who you want to see fight next. I'm always open to new ideas, and even if you want something else Elder Scrolls related, feel free to suggest it in the comments below. And if you liked this video, why don't you show me that you liked it by doing the whole YouTube ritual of liking, commenting and subscribing. Hopefully I'll see you in another video later down the line.